Hello everyone, the US Championship is almost over and it's having a very exciting finish. Round 10 was played yesterday and the situation in the scoreboard is even more complicated than the day before, and the winner is still not decided. It's not even close, even though there's only one more round to go. And this game I'm about to show you was a brilliant game between Zherebukh and Caruana. Zherebukh had the white pieces, he opened with pawn to e4 and Caruana played c5. He didn't go for the Petrov defense, for the Russian game, which he often played in the recent months, which became his most powerful weapon. The Sicilian he plays, but not that often. We have knight to c3, the closed Sicilian by Zherebukh, and now e6. Knight to f3, a6. These are all this is the most common move, a6 after knight to f3. g3, white is preparing to fianchetto kingside, and this will now transpose to the King's Indian attack setup, and it will be nothing like the Sicilian. The only difference is that black has played c5 already, which will not have been played in many King's Indian positions. So this is basically King's Indian attack for white with c5 forced for black, because he played it on move 1. Now b5, another try was knight to c6. These are the two most common moves, bishop g2, bishop b7. Now you can already see the tactical possibilities because of the bishops that are staring at each other along the long diagonal. Now d3, preparing to open up the dark squared bishop. Knight c6, castles, and now d6. And you can see that this setup is quite good for white, even though the main plan of the King's Indian attack and of the Grand Prix attack in the Sicilian is to play f4 early on, which is white's only break in this position. He has to push with f4, f5, and he will have wanted to have played it already, so now he will have to think of something else to do that. And in this position, Yaroslav Zherebukh plays knight to g5. And according to the engines, this is a mistake, and from a human perspective, I don't think it's a bad move at all. I think it's the best move in the position, because if you are trying to attack, then you need to push your plans through, and Caruana still has to stop that. He's not an engine. So now, what he should have played perhaps instead of that, to make his position more solid, was rook to e1, preparing the move e5, or just play e5 immediately, because the diagonal is weak and black has no way to exploit this expansion in the center. The best move for Caruana would have been d5, closing down things, but if he took on d takes e5, then knight takes e5 is of course pinning the bishop, so the knight can't take, and after queen c7, knight takes c6, bishop c6, and now bishop f4, gaining another tempo on the queen, and after queen to b7, white would be better significantly, because bishop c6, queen c6, and now knight to e4, all of white's pieces are centralized. White has finished development, the only piece he has to develop is the queen, and black's kingside is completely underdeveloped, and so the advantages are obvious. So had Zherebukh played e4 or e5, I'm sorry, he would have stood better in this position. However, after knight to g5, the plan to push with f4 is quite obvious, and he will be able to do it most likely. Now, Caruana's best try, apparently, was knight to f6, and this was the most active move, just developing a piece, allowing the move f4. The second try he could have played was queen to c7, preparing to castle queenside in some positions, which would have led to very exciting games. Or he could have played bishop to e7, but there's a problem with this move, because white would have played f4, expanding, and after h6, queen to h5, of course, the knight can't be taken because the rook is hanging. So after g6, queen to h3, you can see that white has a lot of pressure on the position, but black is much better according to the engines. But I don't think this was the best idea, because from a human perspective, this position is hard to defend, and you're going to have some tactical problems here, especially because of the queen on h3, the bishop on g2, the fact that your king is two moves at least away from castling, and whichever side you castle, you are going to have some problems on either side. So after knight to g5, Fabiano Caruana went for h6, just chasing the knight away immediately, which isn't the most challenging variation. And here Zherebukh played knight to h3, of course not going to f3, which would have simply given a tempo to black. The move h6 would have been for free, and of course he wants to push with f4. And now after knight f6, f4 is played. And once again, if you ask the engines, black is supposed to be better here, but from a human's perspective, I believe that white has achieved his plans and that he stands okay. Now we have bishop e7, developing f5, which was a very aggressive try. Much better was to play knight to f2 first, rerouting the knight back to the center and preparing to play knight a2, bishop to e3, developing all the pieces first, because after knight to f2, if black, let's say, castles, bishop e3, d5, chasing the bishop away, then e5, knight d7, knight e2, d4. Once again, black is supposed to be slightly better, but the position is very favorable for white because he has a lot of practical chances. This diagonal is great for white. The knight will be able to come to the square g4 or even to e4, and it's not easy to dislodge it from that square. That's a great outpost. And of course, many squares are weak in black's, but also in white's position, so this would have been a very fighting game. Instead of that, after bishop to e7, Zherebukh played f5, which practically is a great attacking idea, and he's opening up the center while the black king is still on e8. Caruana could have taken immediately, which was the best move, but he inserts b4, a tempo on the knight, knight e2, ef5, rook f5, castles. Now the development is finished, and black managed to resolve most of his issues in the position, and the most advantageous things in the position for black are the squares e5 and d4, which are critically weak. And even though d6 pawn is weak, it's not really a weakness, because how can white mount pressure on the pawn? It's not really that easy. Here Zherebukh makes an inaccurate move, c4, b takes c, of course, en passant, bc, knight to e5, getting into the outpost, attacking the weak d3 pawn, c4, and this is now another weakness in the position. And the terminal factor about the move c4 is this diagonal, which has now become weak for the rest of the game, and there's no way for white to push through this position without weakening himself even more. And of course, the pawns on e4 and on c4 would be terminally weak if d4 is ever played. So the game now continues with bishop to c8. We have rook f1, retreating, the rook was attacked, rook to b8, gaining the important open b file, knight hf4, getting into the game, preparing to jump into d5, but that can always be taken, and the point is that if knight d5, then knight d5, and the bishop has a great square on f6, so this is actually favoring black. So Caruana encourages that, he plays g5, and after g5 he's strategically and positionally winning already, and white has too many weaknesses. The bishop on g2 is just terrible. This is a horrible piece stuck on a square where it isn't doing absolutely anything. And after knight to d5, knight d5, c d5, you can see that the bishop doesn't even have the h3 square. So this bishop has no future. The only plan is to move the knight, move the rook, play bishop to f1, and then get to a diagonal from which it could only be attacking a6. So not a bright future for this piece, while on the other hand, the dark squared bishop for black is coming to f6. This bishop is amazing, it's controlling almost the entire board, and you can see the strategical advantages for black. And if you ask the engines, they would give -2 for black in this position. Now immediately bishop f6, attacking the a1 rook, immediately some tactical issues for white, d4, which is a lesser evil move in this position. You have to do something. cd4, knight d4, now bishop to g4 is played, gaining a tempo on the queen, and after queen to a4, this is now a simply winning position, tactically even. And Caruana finds a brilliant move here, after which Zherebukh could have resigned, but he didn't. The move is knight to d3. And this is now preparing rook to b4, of course winning the knight with check, because the king is on the diagonal. It's threatening to take the bishop as well, and of course he has to react, Zherebukh has to react, he plays queen to c4. And after queen to c4, there was one killer move and one very good move. Of course, playing rook to b4 allows white to take the knight. After that you take the knight on d4 with check and you grab the exchange, which is okay, but a much better try for Caruana, the move after which Zherebukh would have probably resigned. And during the live commentary, this was heavily analyzed, this idea of knight takes c1. Because after knight c1, rook a c1, you can play queen to b6, double attacking the knight. And whatever white does, let's say, the best move is rook takes f6, the bishop is hanging, so that would be the best try to at least not lose all the material. And after rook f6, rook f to c8 is a killing move, and there's nothing you can do. Of course, if he takes, he can't get two rooks for the queen, because queen c8, rook c8, rook c8, bishop c8, the bishop is defending as well. After rook fc8, if he tries queen to d3, then of course the rook is hanging on c1. And if he tries queen to f1, defending the rook, then simply queen takes knight with check, and the position is busted. And of course, after queen takes d4, the king moves, rook takes c1, queen takes, and then queen takes f6. Thanks very much. 100 points in material up. So after queen to c4, the position was completely busted after knight takes c1. However, Caruana played rook to b4, which is amazing as well, just winning as well. And we have queen d3, bishop d4 check, bishop e3, he has to defend from the check, he's losing the exchange anyway. Bishop a1, rook a1, and now queen to f6, attacking the rook. The rook has to move, we have rook to e1, rook to c8, activating the other rook on the most active square, h3 chasing the bishop away, bishop d7, controlling the entire board. Once again, compare the bishop on d7 and the bishop on g2. We have queen a6, a completely irrelevant pawn, and after rook to c2, getting on the back rank, on the second rank, I'm sorry, rook to f1, attacking the queen. Zherebukh actually resigned with his own move, and the point of that is that Caruana would have simply played queen to b2, and how are you defending this position? There's nothing you can do, the position is busted, and you won't be able to hold on to material. Whatever white does, black is winning something or checkmating in the next 5 to 10 moves. So Zherebukh, being a 2600 strong grandmaster, he resigned. And with this victory, Caruana is now at 7 out of 10. Unfortunately for him, Samuel Shankland is having a tournament of his life, so he is at 7.5 coming into last round. So he gets to decide his own fate. And if Shankland should lose or draw and Caruana wins today, then of course he stands a chance, but that remains to be seen. Definitely an exciting finish to the US Championship, and I must say I would love for Caruana to win the US Championship, to continue his winning streak after the candidates and the Grenke. But it would be a huge confidence boost for Sam Shankland to come ahead Caruana, Wesley So, Nakamura, Kobian, and all the other names. So stay tuned for the last round, I will be covering it sometimes tomorrow. And thanks very much for watching, I hope you liked the video, stay tuned for more chess, bye bye!